All right, hello everyone. We're going to be going over this week 2 content, supply and equilibrium changes. There is going to be a link in the description below. If you have the time, please sign in. At any time in the video, if you have any questions, you can put them in the comment below, and I'll get back to them when I can. All right, so let's talk about supply. So just like supply and demand, we have quantity supplied. And so this is just the amount willing to sell at a particular price point. So remember, supply is all about the producers, all about the businesses. And so as um, I'm going to want to sell stuff as a producer rather than buy stuff. So if a chocolate bar is worth $3 in the market, and I want to sell six chocolate bars, then my quantity supplied is 6. The law of supply is very similar to the law of demand. We have the price, and as it goes up, the quantity supplied increases. So this makes sense because as a business, I want to get as much money for my product as possible. Similarly, as the price decreases, the quantity supplied decreases as well. So you'll notice that the supply curve is upward sloping, and you notice that no matter how I raise the price, it still just moves to a different point along the curve. So once again, price does not shift the supply curve. Price changes only lead to a movement along the curve. So no matter how I move this price up and down, it's still going to be on the curve, and so the curve itself does not shift. However, there do exist shifters of supply. And the biggest one that we're going to be focusing on throughout this course is the cost of production inputs. So as a supplier, I can't just make things magically appear. And so I need to have raw materials and other things to make. And so the material costs are what I cost. So these can be things like building permits, cacao beans, um, cottons for t-shirts, and things like that. And as they get more and more cheap, then the supply increases. And as they get more and more expensive, supply decreases. So as things become more expensive, I as a producer, as a business, can no longer make as many t-shirts as I used to. We also have things like labor and wage. So as the labor costs go lower, then the supply increases. And as the labor increases, then the supply decreases. So if there's a minimum wage increase, then there are less people who are working. Technology advancements, just in general, as things become more technologically advanced, I am more easily able to assemble a lot of my stuff, so supply increases. Finally, number of firms. If there are more grocery stores along the block, then the overall supply of groceries has increased. Once again, supply, shift, increase is represented to a shift to the right, and decrease in supply is represented with a shift to the left. So ultimately, and a lot of what we've done is to bring both supply and demand together with this equilibrium. So our equilibrium condition is that when there exists no incentive to change. So if there are no incentive to change, that means everyone's happy where they are. And so the condition is quantity supplied equal to quantity demand. So anywhere along the line of supply is quantity supplied, and anywhere along the line of demand is quantity demand. And you'll notice that there's only one point where they're equal, and it's in the middle. So let's talk about when this equilibrium condition doesn't exist. In this case, let's talk about surplus. So this is when quantity supplied is greater than quantity demand. So notice here, the quantity supplied is at this point, and then the quantity demand is over at this point. So that'll be surplus, see, quantity supplied, quantity demand. So if there's a surplus, so you notice that the quantity supplied is over here, quantity demand is over here. And so basically, as a supplier, you notice that you have a lot of leftover stuff, and no one's going to buy all that leftover things. And so you end up having all this extra stuff, and so there's an incentive to decrease the price. Next, we have a shortage. Quantity supplied is less than quantity demand. Notice that there's an incentive to increase the price. So currently, in our current events, you notice how certain products are more and more expensive. And that's because there's a shortage. And so there's this incentive to increase the price because the quantity demand is greater than the quantity supplied. Changes in equilibrium. So we've talked about all these shifts and things like that, but we haven't talked about what they represent in terms of equilibrium changes. So let's first start off just going through each of them one by one. So there's a demand shift increase, once again represented by a shift to the right. And then what we have is that, notice, from where we originally were, the price and the quantity has increased overall. Now, if we decrease the price, decrease demand, then you notice that the overall price and quantity has decreased. Next, let's increase the supply. If we increase the supply, you'll notice that the overall price has decreased, but there's more quantity. Next, if we decrease the supply, prices increase, and the quantity decreases as well. So let's just work on a single example problem. So the price of the permit needed to build houses has increased. At the same time, more and more individuals are renting apartments instead of home ownership. What will happen to the equilibrium quantity and quantity of houses? Equilibrium price and quantity of houses. So first off, as for any word problem, let's just break it down. So let's work with the first sentence here. The price of permit needed to build houses. So building houses, and we're talking about the market for houses here. So if I'm building houses, this is going to talk about supply. And if the price of the permit needed to build those houses has increased, then that means that the material cost, the cost of production has increased. So overall, what this will represent is the fact that my supply is decreasing. And so you notice here, supply is going to decrease over here. At the same time, more and more individuals are renting apartments instead of home ownership. So this is people who want houses. So this is going to consumer side, this is going to represent demand. And so apartments and houses are substitutes. And so as more and more people want apartments, less and less people want houses. And so the demand of houses decreases. Demand 2. And so notice here we're stuck with a problem. What will happen to the equilibrium price and quantity of houses? Well, I can tell for sure that the quantity has decreased because we went from this point, red, to green, and we definitely went backwards in quantity. But I can't really tell if the price has increased or decreased. And so let's show this a different way. The supply is going to decrease and demand has decreased. We've established that. So all you need to know is, what does this mean in terms of price and quantity changes? So supply changes decrease means that the prices increase, and that means the quantity decreases. At the same time, a decrease in demand is going to represent in a decrease in price and a decrease in quantity. So notice the equilibrium price is a question mark. It's ambiguous. We don't know because the supply is going to push the price up, but the demand is going to push the price down. And so you have two opposing forces. And ultimately, in the end, you just don't know for sure because we don't have any numbers to put on these things. But notice how both quantities are pointing downwards. And so that's why we can definitely tell that the quantity has decreased.